I'm Sawyer, and you're listening to Our House A to Z.
All right, welcome back to our Mental Health Month edition of Our House A to Z.
This is not our Mental Health Month edition.
Well, technically you should have 4 because there's like 4 weeks in a month, right?
I know, and somebody, Amber Owens, reached out and said, hey, it's Mental Health Month, like you should feature somebody or a counselor or something, and she's 100% right. We should definitely do that. The way that they all laid out schedule-wise, we didn't get anybody scheduled in time, and so we have to do that. I have a few ideas of people that I'd like to have on.
The month of May
in
or
that
the
regard.
month of June?
I think she said the month of May. I think it's May. So
This might be our last
anyway,
week of May.
It is. It's actually the very last day of May that this releases.
Okay.
So know this, that this
That
is...
a sign of mental health issues is procrastinating and being late. I'm just kidding.
too much on your plate and not planning ahead enough. But know this is by no means all-encompassing mental health in one day with 2 people that have zero experience medically with mental health.
No. I mean, I remember we had Matt and Carla Bombara too, really. Matt and Carla Stinton. Carla, formerly Bombara, when I knew her back in the day.
And that was like a 2-parter, I think. I think we did 2 parts.
Yeah, that sounds right. And they can speak to it a little more authoritatively. But I will say, we'll address it today without a guest speaker on. We'll address it today from a pastoral perspective.
Okay. And we had Ashley Moniz on.
And she did phenomenal.
And she did great. That was
She's a pro.
2 years ago.
She's a pro.
So hopefully there'll be links for that too. So mental health, it's a lot. It's a whole thing. And it's, when you talk about this generation and, whether it's like pastoring or being a Christian in this generation, the mental health component is something that other generations didn't experience the struggles and the challenges that this generation is experiencing.
Would you say that...
Or to the extent that it is. It's not that they weren't present mental health issues, but...
Would you say that the last generation did not take, let's say, mental health days, when you take a mental health day?
Yes, I would definitely say they did not. But they probably also didn't take birthdays off and anniversaries off. And I mean, old generation, they didn't take vacations.
So let me ask you this.
It's a very different culture.
Then so you're an employee, but you're also an employer. You're also a pastor, and you also work in the secular field too. Talk to me about the value of, because I know you come from a long line of like work ethic people. So there's a part of us that are kind of like, we roll our eyes a little bit at millennials and the wave of apathy and laziness and, the whole like FMLA for, paternity leave and all this kind of stuff. There's like an ongoing sort of running joke. Speak in defense of a mental health day.
Ooh, I like it.
Because you were on the debate club.
Yeah, I do feel like there has been a pendulum swing, of course, and there was so much identity in work for so many generations, and your job and family and yourself were always put last.
Just so people understand, when you say identity in your job, just clarify,
like
elaborate.
Value and how you were seen by other people. I mean, think about back in the 50s. I mean, there were no like men taking time with their families. It was kind of like, hey, you worked all day, you came home and ate dinner, and there was no value really put on family time per se.
Okay.
It's kind of how we say like kids were raised back then, but they weren't parented.
Okay.
And now there's like a strong parenting emphasis.
Yeah,
I'd say a strong like parenting emphasis. And I think it's the same way with mental health. I think we saw a lot of things that could have been improved and could have been better, but people didn't know how to handle them. And so I think the idea behind it is if you have more time for yourself to think and process and aren't working 40, 60, 80 hours per week, your overall health in general is better. I mean, look at like all of the different statistics of different countries and how they do vacation time and work days and work weeks. They look so much different than the American calendar because they prioritize downtime, they prioritize rest. And I think we've gotten ourselves in such a pickle that mental health days are now a necessity for people to be healthy.
Do you think that
I don't think it's ideal, and I don't think that's how the Lord created us.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So do you think you need a mental health day if you're Sabbathing correctly?
No.
Interesting.
I don't. I do not feel like if your schedule reflected what the Lord wanted your schedule to look like, I do not think that you would need a mental health day.
Right. Wow.
But, I mean, I could probably say the same for vacation.
So is it fair to say that a Sabbath is a mental health day?
Yes.
It should be. Your Sabbath should be your mental health day.
Yeah. But nowadays, I think it's nicer to say, hey, I'm going to take my day off, not on my actual day off. I'm going to take it here and do what I want on the other day because I have the access to mental health days.
Interesting. A wise person once said this to me, a wise person named Jamal Wheeler. He said, if you work with your head, you should Sabbath with your hands. And if you work with your hands, you should Sabbath with your head. And I thought that was really interesting because when I hold it up to my own life, I know that like when I'm off, like from here, not meeting with people, not writing a message, not, teaching something or whatever, I love like a building or doing yard work or, some sort of manual project.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that lines up? Because I've heard him say that too, and I think that is what naturally fills you. Would you say that the Lord designed Sabbath for filling us? Like for us to be filled? What do you think the purpose of Sabbath is? Because I think the technical part goes against like the working part and any.
It depends. You're not working to make money. I think it's not like you do a part-time job where you are still working, make a salary or wages. I mean, Jesus says.
But isn't there like not even cooking? Like
Jesus
you're not cooking
said man wasn't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for the man, which means God doesn't need us to take a Sabbath, but we need it to be restorative. So I think whatever you do that's restorative to you while setting it aside to keep it holy, right? So there's a piece of it that has to be consecrated as unto the Lord. Whereas if you're making money for yourself, it's for you. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's anything wrong with, okay, I'm going to read a book. I do manual labor all week or whatever. I'm going to read a book or I'm going to whatever, where my mind is engaged in a different way because it's restorative to me.
Right.
I think, well, I do. I think that the mental health component, which is like our topic of discussion, is part of health is balance. Mm-hmm. Everything about health is balance. It's like you got to balance out the parts of the food pyramid, right, to stay healthy nutritionally and from a dietary standpoint. Well, the same thing goes from physical to mental to emotional. We have to have this balance where we're using the things that we aren't always using. You're exercising your non-dominant piece.
Right.
So if you're right-handed, you're doing things occasionally with your left hand so that your muscle doesn't degenerate. And I think that the same thing goes for all the different parts of us. And I think that the reason mental health is so taxed is because we run in these routines. We run in these like circles. We have patterns in our lives where our mind is checked. It's not as engaged as it should be. So it ends up degenerating. We talked about this with Kings and all this other stuff, is the critical thinking component. Mm-hmm. It's missing. Why? Because our minds aren't healthy because they're checked.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really...
And when I say checked, I mean like a coat check. Like you check it at the door like and just do another routine.
Like when you're going on like social media, kind of like wasting your time on that kind of stuff.
Or just your job, your grind. Okay. You wake up, you go to work, you do your thing.
I think that's really true. I think it's just a really broad brushstroke of mental health. Because I mean,
right, which we're talking about as pastors, not like as therapists or clinicians.
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify that. Like this is not talking about like people with disorders and...
No, we're talking about the general mass public, the average person.
Right, like not people with like diagnosed disorders and...
Right, no chemical imbalances. And all that sort of thing. No, which is more and more, but I wonder how much of the increase, the uptick in those sorts of disorders is because mental health wasn't maintained at lower issues.
Right. So where do you feel like if you were going to review yourself, if you were going to give yourself a score on mental health, like what do you think about your own mental health and how do you feel like you do staying in like a healthy balance?
Ooh, I don't know. You should probably have somebody else diagnose you.
Diagnose you? I don't think anyone needs to diagnose anyone.
Your mom was talking about a beautiful mind this morning, and it's like if I diagnose myself, like I'm a genius that nobody else understands. But if everybody else diagnoses me, they're like, no, you're an absolute stark raving lunatic. So could both be true? Maybe. Are they? Probably not.
Okay. Do you feel like you would like to take a mental health day? And why are they mental health days? Why do you not just take a day off? Like, why is it not just like paid time off or like why don't you use a vacation day?
I just think taking a mental health day is maybe an indicator that you already don't have a good work-life balance. Maybe you already don't have if you work hard, then you play hard. It's like you don't take vacation seriously, but you take work really seriously. But maybe people who don't take work very seriously, maybe you're taking vacation way too seriously. Maybe you're taking your days off too seriously.
Take vacation too seriously?
It is absolutely possible. I can make you a list right now.
Take it too seriously or take too much vacation time?
Yeah, then you're taking it too seriously.
Too seriously.
Just like if you don't take enough, you're taking work too seriously.
You don't want me to take anything seriously.
Definitely. You can't be married to me and take anything too seriously. But I do think that for myself, I would say that I probably critically think too much. I think about things a lot. I'm over-analytical. So I don't need more days where my mind is catching up. I think I need days where my mind is like sitting this one out.
Would that be considered a mental health day?
For me,
A
yes.
day where you're sitting out?
My mind is sitting out. It's like a mental vacation.
You can check it at that point.
It's a mental vacation, and I can go build something in the backyard.
Right.
You know? But that's what mental health is for me. For somebody else, your mind might need to be engaged in order to be more healthy.
Yeah. I love the Sabbath correlation and this bringing that into this conversation because I feel like our brains are too full. They're too busy. They're too active, all of those things. And so
Too full does not mean too active. Think about your belly. Your belly being too full may not mean that it's too active. It means
That's true.
You've just consumed too much and you can't process it.
Yeah, so that's part of it. But I feel like the too active thing is a problem too. Like just it's exactly what you just said, that you overanalyze. And so that's too active. It's like where you can't slow it down. There's no space in your brain to actually hear from the Lord because it's just go, 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 on to the next thing. What am I doing next? My brain is thinking about. And honestly, a lot of that I feel like is the root of that. I feel like is a lot of self-centeredness and self-focus because a lot of what is occupying our brain is how we're viewed and how we're producing and what other people are thinking about us and
it's a bunch
what's
of stuff that we
satisfying our
shouldn't be.
need
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
all of those things that our brain just so quickly gets full of. And how can you be like intentional to make space in your brain from those things? Because sometimes I feel like, hey, I finally have like some time to think. How do you train your brain to be more disciplined and not just kind of spiral and go through like the gazillion different things you're prone to think about or overanalyze? Like when you're saying you check your brain, what's like a practical way of checking your brain in like a self-discipline way?
Let me say, checking your brain does not mean like a temporary lobotomy.
I know.
It means that you're using a different part of your brain, like left brain, right brain type stuff. Like maybe checking your brain is you do something creative because you do something concrete all week long. So you do something abstract.
I know, but don't you feel like that's just occupying it with something else? Like, how do you make space for the Lord to like speak or to hear anything?
I think
from the Lord?
That's a perfect example. I think there are people who, when they use the creative part of it, the Lord ministers to them. The other piece is opened up. It's like receiving. I think sometimes it's okay to let your mind spiral a little bit too. I don't mean it like spiral into depression or into, a terrible place. I mean like, you know how people say I needed the first 3 days of vacation just to like unwind or before I can actually rest. I think that that's kind of along the same lines. Your mind has to spiral and feel like I have to disengage from all these different things. And I feel like, well, where's the order in this? Where's the structure in this? Whatever. It's like, no, that's the whole thing. You're letting something sort of crash and not worried about where everything lands.
Right.
And then you rest. Then you whatever.
Yeah.
And so people build that into their time off.
I know I get frustrated with myself where sometimes I know you and I will be like, oh, have you thought about, you'll ask me like, have you thought about such and such? And I'm like, I haven't even had 5 minutes to think about that or to like know how I feel about that situation. Or, when that happens and you're like, oh, all these things that I want to like invest and dedicate mental time to. Yeah. It's almost like you don't have the time to do it because, so many other things are on my mind or there were other priorities and that thing got pushed down.
You're such a woman.
Real-time silence. Pray for Zach.
What is that supposed to mean?
I mean,
that you always have time to think about everything you want to think about?
No, because it doesn't take me long to think about it.
I haven't processed that yet.
Like, give me 30 seconds. I'm going to take a bathroom break. When I come back, I'm going to tell you. Well,
you can't be that much of an overanalyzer then, if that's the case.
No, I think the things that I want to analyze, I analyze. But when it's like, hey, what do you think about this?
I don't mean something like that. Like something maybe serious with the kids or something. And we're like, how are we going to address this?
I know, but you know me. How fast do I like answer everything too fast?
I know.
But then I analyze it later, So speak first and think later.
I know.
Yeah. And then don't stop thinking. You just keep thinking.
You do that, but then you say you don't have any regrets.
Yeah, I don't.
Wow.
I have a lot of regrets. They just don't have to do with things I've thought about.
What my mom would say when we were a kid, if we ever said anything like that, she said, "Oh, to be like thee."
Oh, to be like thee. And the irony of that, I know Doreen, she doesn't want to be like anybody. That's my favorite thing about her. Anyway, so I think circling around the mental health day.
How did this turn into a podcast about the mental health day?
Well, it's mental health month. And so we were talking about taking mental health days. Because like you just said, the average person is maybe not checking into a mental hospital, or maybe they're not on a laundry list of medications. Maybe the average person is just saying, okay, I should probably be aware of my mental health. Mm-hmm. You know, you should be.
That's what it is, mental health awareness.
Yeah, I should probably be aware of it, regardless of whether or not I've ever been diagnosed or seen a therapist or treated or whatever. It's like, no, how are you doing mentally? Do you feel like there's order in your ability to process things mentally? Do you have time? Like what you just said, do you have time to think about things? A mental health day is like I haven't had time to think about all these things.
Right.
I'm going to think about them on my mental health day.
Where's my list? Speaking of lists,
I feel more mentally healthy.
I feel like I make a lot of mental space. If you are struggling with your mental health, again, in a really broad sense.
If you're struggling with your mental health.
Yeah, I feel like having lists is a really good way to make space in your brain. A lot of times I try to keep everything in my brain, and I get overwhelmed or frustrated because I'll feel like this is too much. I can't remember all these things. And so if I write them down and have checklists, like you said, of things that I want to think about or things that I need to dedicate time to, or a lot of times just conversations I want to have with you or my friends, or things that I want to not have to hold in my brain.
Yeah.
It's like I almost am closing out the computer screen in my brain, closing out boxes.
Because you made a list.
Because once a list is made, once it's written down on my phone, I don't have to worry about it. And it gives me more mental space.
Interesting. I've heard people do that with songwriting. They have songs in their head, but until they get them down, write them on paper or take a little recorder.
I mean, yeah, you'd be crazy.
Voice memo. Yeah, trying to store all that stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, don't you, when you're writing sermons and things, when you think of a point, or when you think of hey, I really want to share that on Sunday.
Yeah.
What do you do with it from there?
Yeah.
Do you get your notebook out and write it down fast? Do you write it in your phone?
No, I just
voice notes.
I kind of commit it to a place until I can write it down.
I'm sorry, what place?
A place, a special place, a secret sermon place.
A place in your brain.
Yeah.
In your brain, is that a certain door number that everything sits behind if it's message related?
Because usually if I write it down too early, then I haven't mulled it over enough. I want to mull it over and be does this roll off the tongue better like this or like that? Will people understand this better?
And you never forget anything. You don't forget it?
Oh, sure.
I know, but doesn't that drive you crazy?
No, because if I forget it, I'm I wasn't supposed to say that. Because sometimes I'll be oh, shoot, I had the best thing. And then it usually will come back to me, or it doesn't, and no one will ever know.
Oh, to be like thee.
Well, I do 100 things wrong. 1,000. 10,000.
Oh my gosh. What else do you have to say about mental health? As a pastor, what are you seeing? What are you feeling is one of the hurdles that our church family or people in general are kind of needing to navigate through right now in regard to mental health?
I think worry. I think worry is the number one sabotager of the average mental health.
Worry / fear or
yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Worry / fear. I just think it makes normal, sane people paranoid. It eats away at us. It eats away at our peace. And it's I know people that struggle with it as a vice. It's a place their mind just goes.
Right.
But almost even if your mind doesn't go there, there's an element where we no longer practice self-control when it comes to worry. Mm-hmm. And I think our mental health erodes with worry.
Yeah.
That's coming from a pastor. You know what I'm saying? I'm speaking as a pastor of people who I love people, and I'm why are you so bound up by that?
So is
thing?
it a faith crisis?
I don't know. That's a great question. It sounds right. Or maybe it's just things that it's not I got to have faith that this bill's going to get paid. It's you're worried about something. Well, there are things you can do about it, and you're not even doing those things.
Yeah.
Or there are things that you can't do about it, and so why are you worried?
Right. That is interesting because I do feel sometimes we see that where there's worry about a certain thing or frustration or hurt where you want things to change, but there's actually not any action. And so there's some sort of disconnect mentally between where you want to be, even the faith to move something forward, you being a partner, participating in what you want the Lord to do and what you see the Lord doing, and that actually happening. It's there's this disconnect where the worry part is crippling people to not actually do anything instead.
Yeah, it's almost worry takes the place of the actual thing that you could do to solve a problem. But it's we choose worry instead. It's very counterintuitive. I know the whole concept of retreating is probably on the rise. I think people are probably, as part of this mental health awareness revival, people are increasingly venturing towards the concept of retreat. And I was talking with
like going on a retreat, like an overnight type thing?
Yeah, like retreating like as a recreational activity.
Not like backing away from.
No, not like backing away from. Although it is backing away from, but just in a healthy sense, not in a fear sense, but in an intentional sense. I'll say intentional, not reactional. I was talking to John Littlefield, who is my primary care physician and our lead doctor here at the River Health and Wellness Center, and he is kind of a guru when it comes to retreating.
He is.
He's logged like maybe decades of time growing an expertise in this area. He and his wife lead these things. He's led our guys on staff in retreats and things like that. He just has a lot to say on it. And I feel like it's really good to hear from somebody like that because he's not somebody whose work ethic has ever been compromised by his healthy awareness of a need for retreating. And the difference is it's not reactionary.
Yeah.
Like if you're taking a mental health day because you're mentally unhealthy,
It's
you're
like a
already
version of Sabbath.
you're already too late.
Yeah.
You're already too late. It's like pastors take sabbaticals. And I remember being in a group of pastors one time and somebody was asking the group, what do you guys think about sabbaticals?
He said it's already too late. If you need a sabbatical, it's already too late.
The tragic thing about sabbaticals is most often by the time you're taking one, it's too late. Most often. Not always, but it takes that John Littlefield mindset, that intentionality of saying, you know what I should probably do? I should probably take a couple days.
Right.
Or longer or shorter or whatever. And if we're living a well-ordered and well-balanced life, then we're building in intentional retreat.
Right. Well, it's that whole idea of building a life you don't want to escape from.
Yes.
You know?
That's so beautiful. Part of that is like things that you don't want to do because you don't feel like they're productive. And that's been my biggest enemy is I don't feel like a retreat's productive enough. And so I struggle with assigning value to it. I would encourage people like simple things like a Tuesday night prayer. Coming out on Tuesday night prayer, don't come with the intentionality of I'm in a crisis and I got to go pray.
Right.
It's like why a lot of people end up coming to church. I'm in a crisis and I went to church as a kid and I feel like I should probably come back to God. It's like, well, if you
it's like a good reason to come back, but it shouldn't be why you stay.
Maybe, exactly. Maybe you could have avoided a crisis if this is built into your life.
Of course. Anyway, I got to pick up the kids, so we got to run.
Okay.
The kids are going to get dismissed.
Well, why don't you want to go ahead and close us in prayer?
Sure. Father, thank you for this time together. And God, just help us as a people to have a fresh perspective of what you say about mental health, Lord. We see so many things coming down the pipe. We see things filling our Instagrams and our social media and what we're hearing on the news and reports and all these different types of things, God. But we want to hear from you on what you think about it. And God, just help to kind of clear away all the excess and allow us to find our peace in you and not just in vacations or mental health days, God, but bring us higher, bring us to a higher place, a higher level where we're pleasing you with our time, with our days, with the moments that you've allotted us, Lord, and that we do it all to honor and bless you with this life that we've been given. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. All
Our
right.
House, friends, and family. We will see you next Friday here on Our House.
This is Messer. And I'm Willa. This is Our House from A to Z. Thanks for coming over.
Am I in danger?
It's a rite of passage.